Well, the bad news about this past winter is that it was just devastating for a lot of wildlife. It was devastating for hunting and fishing, too, for most of us. But the good news is it's just about over, and the deer herd has made it through in apparently splendid shape. Bob Garner has a complete report. We have all the news and features of the outdoors, so stay tuned. I'm Fred Trost. It's Thursday night. Time for Michigan Outdoors. Well, here they were, our deer in fall of 1984. This is October, Bob, looking at some of our healthy deer going into the winter. I had a concern. I know some biologists had a concern. Not so many hunters had the same concern, but about the size of our deer herd. When we went into the fall of 84, we were carrying over more deer in this state, I think, than possibly ever before.
We were very close, right on the brink of that anyway.
We have had a couple very easy winters the past couple winters, and it has caused the fawn crop to survive, to flourish. Hunters have not had great conditions in the past couple years for deer hunting, so the herd had not been trimmed back. Our concern was, what is the winter of 1985 going to hold? Now, these deer look like they could handle a tough winter right now in October, but most deer are healthy in October. They're eating acorns. We had a bumper acorn crop, beech nut crop, plenty of food. The deer were putting on fat like they need to do to make it through January and February, which was always tough, has always been tough for deer, except, like I said, in the past couple years. Now we headed into November, deer season, waiting for those first wintry blasts. Here was opening day in the northern part of the Lower Peninsula, around Clare, where I was hunting.
Yeah, there was hardly any snow. In fact, even up in the Upper Peninsula, there were just scattered reports of some snow. Here in Menominee County, for example, where I was hunting, there was no snow, and this was the third day of the season.
The effect of this is good for the deer's health, but not good for trimming the herd, because it didn't provide ideal conditions for hunters, made deer hunting tougher, so the herd was large in number as we headed into December. Again, waiting for the winter blasts, the white Christmas, the snow. Here we are just about 2 weeks ahead of Christmas on our snowshoe hare hunt. Our cottontail hunt was aborted because of no snow.
No snow.
We had no snow through December until January hit.
And then the bottom dropped out. Starting from the 1st of January all through the middle, towards the end of January, we got no thaw, and it became tough. Deer had to go to yards.
Now, the saving grace was, though, the fall that you just saw, the October, November, December, that did not have snow, did not have extremely cold temperatures, plenty of food on the ground, plenty of food for the deer, and they ate it. They put on weight, they put on fat, so when they hit the deer yards, in January, they weren't really forced into these deer yards until the blast came, the temperatures plummeted like we did around Tip-Up Town. Then they started moving to the yards.
And they moved in and out of the yards. But for a report on southern Michigan, let's go to regional biologist from the DNR, Ed Tucker.
The deer in southern Michigan weren't affected too much by the weather this year, although they were concentrated a little more than the last couple of years. We don't have yards per se down here in southern Michigan, but we do have the winter concentration areas where the deer pull in from several miles. Up in the thumb area, they may pull in from 5 to 8 to 10 miles sometimes in the wintertime. The weather itself certainly isn't going to affect the fawn crop any as far as we can tell at the present time. Normally, the fawns of the year down here may be twins, particularly even some of the fawns that were born in the spring turn out to have single fawns in the following spring themselves. So our productivity is pretty good, and the weather itself didn't hurt it any, or won't hurt it any, I'm sure, for next fall's hunting season.
Well, it certainly will affect the hunting for pheasants, for our birds, but not for the deer. That's good news in southern Michigan.
Sure is. But for a look at the other end of the state, let's go to Bob Strong up in the Upper Peninsula.
And he has a report, I think, that is more optimistic than we would have thought.
Absolutely.
The winter here in the UP has been quite normal for the Upper Peninsula. We had a fairly easy December, much snow till the first week in January. And January and February snow conditions were soft. Deer were able to move around. So our losses are going to be fairly light this year, unless we have an extremely hard March and April. But every day gain now has been real helpful. So our severity index is 10 points behind last year. So we expect losses to be low this year, and we've had no confirmed starvation to date.
that's good news from the UP, and I think quite a surprise to a lot of us who felt the winter down here, the sub-zero temperatures that seem to last for so long. Of course, the northern part of the Lower Peninsula is where the deer hunters are congregated. It's also where generally the largest population of deer is congregated throughout the state. And for this report, Bob?
We went to Gary Bushell from Houghton Lake.
Across northern Michigan right now, what we're doing, we're looking at what the overall effect of the winter has been on deer. And quite frankly, we have probably a more mild year than even what an average year would be here in the north. We didn't start receiving snowfall until about mid-January, and it was light, fluffy snow, deep snow that deer were able to paw through an abundant crop of beech nuts and also acorns in many places. And as far as winter losses are concerned, our biologists and technicians have been investigating deer concentration areas, including deer yards, throughout the winter, and winter losses have been absolutely minimal. We're very pleased to note that we're not having any losses at all. And as far as what we can expect next fall, right now we are beginning to do our spring productivity data by autopsying female deer. And what I'm going to anticipate is that our herd came through the winter in pretty good shape. The females came through in good shape, and I'm going to anticipate we're going to have good production going into the fall. So I think that hunters across northern lower Michigan are going to see a lot of deer, and hopefully we're going to have a good deer season.
Well, these deer will be seen out on the roadsides very soon, nibbling on the grass along the expressways. It looks like they made it through winter in banner condition. We're happy about that. Some good news from a harsh winter in Michigan outdoors. The almanac predicts cold, snow, rain, the same type of stuff we've had, which makes conditions pretty bad. A good time to stay indoors and get your outdoor gear ready for spring. We are opening up this week's trophy book with a big crappie from Saginaw Bay. Peter Hagany from Freeland is on the first page of this week's trophy book because a year ago this week he caught this 1 pound, 13-ounce black crappie. He was ice fishing on Saginaw Bay, and that's a reminder that those early spring crappies are starting to hit. Now, the season is closed right now on northern pike, but I think we should recognize George Stefan from Newego for his admirable catch of a 22-pound, 15-ounce northern from Croton Pond. This was an afternoon pike, about 4 p.m. It hit a sucker minnow on George's tip-up. That was late in January. What a pike that is. And here's another species that's closed right now in most waters of the state, except for the Detroit and St. Clair rivers, Lake St. Clair and Lake Erie. Walleye fishing is legal year-round in those waters. This is a huge trophy, 12 pounds, 4 ounces, 33 inches long. It hit one of those Finnish minnows in Lake St. Clair at 10 o'clock at night on January 3rd. And that's why we're going to make lucky angler Dennis Wilkins from Mount Clemens our Michigan Outdoors Master Angler of the Week.
And by the way, Fred Trost went over last week to talk to Governor Blanchard about issues affecting sportsmen. And I think you're going to be very interested in what he had to say on this particular issue.
What about gun control?
I don't see it as any major answer to crime. If I did, I'd support it. I would. I would not hold back because of the NRA or the gun groups. There may be more we can do on pistol control, maybe, but there are so many other things we got to do in fighting crime that I don't have a lot of patience with people who think that's the way to go, because all that does is polarize the issue on whether you're going to fight crime or not. And I don't see it, I don't see any reason to further regulate sports rifles or sports weapons anyway.
They are very highly regulated, and a lot of people don't know that.
Yeah. I will tell you that if we threw a few more people in jail who violated firearms laws or committed felonies with a firearm, I think it would be much more helpful. But right now, that's not being done. First of all, judges are not going to jail people who they think are, quote, respectable, who commit a firearm violation. They won't. Secondly, even if they did, we don't have the space. So it's an academic question, and I just don't see any need for further gun laws myself.
When these other things aren't being done, or even...
Yeah, if we had done everything else,
We probably wouldn't have the crime problem.
speedy trials, certain punishment, prisons, more police, more visibility of police, things that which we're working on for the first time in years. We're going to build more prisons. We're adding more state troopers. We are adding more troopers for auto theft and narcotics. You could speed up the trials. There's a lot of things you can do. We're working on early childhood education. And my Michigan Youth Corps helps teenagers, gets them off the streets in the summer. You know, if you've done all those things in a thorough way, you still have a problem. I suppose we can look at it, but my guess is our sports people would too. But that isn't being done. I don't see it right now as a serious way to fight crime. I see it as a serious way to have a highly charged, polarized debate. But I don't see it on the agenda, and I don't think the legislature does either.
Well, that's the first time I've had a chance to sit down and informally talk with the governor. I was impressed. I mean, this guy is fair. He's reasonable. He's not a pushover by any stretch of the imagination, Bob, not to anybody.
He's deceiving. He's a sharp guy.
He certainly is. He's done an admirable job with the state, and he has more announcements of things that are really going to benefit sportsmen coming up next week. We'll give you another aspect of that interview on the show.
Coming up now, let's take a look at some of the mail we get.
Okay.
This one's from P.J. Bakianowski from Harper Woods. We are faithful Thursday night watchers of your TV program. We have noticed that all your hunting pictures are filmed on private or club lands. We would like to know how you would propose that most of us who do not have access to such private hunting preserves go about hunting public land. We have hunted public lands for a good many years, and every year find that there are more hunters than deer.
Well, PJ, if you are talking about deer, we've done a couple deer hunting stories on private land. Most of our deer hunting stories have been on public land, and almost all of our small game hunting stories are on public land. We don't reveal where we are on public or private land because we don't want to give away anybody's private hot spots. But we'll pay a little more attention this fall to some tips for public land hunters.
Fred, here's a letter we seem to get quite often from Alan Koskela of Pontiac. Are you interested in 35mm shots of Michigan?
Well, it's not that we're disinterested, but we are so inundated with trophy book pictures and pictures of people with fish and game that we really can't do anything with just scenic shots. But the Michigan Natural Resources magazine has a reader's photo issue, and we suggest you send your scenic photos of Michigan to the DNR because they have a contest set up for that. There are all kinds of ways to cook venison, Kathy. To take these lean little strips, you could pop them in the frying pan for just
stir-fry.
a couple minutes.
Right.
They'd be great. But another favorite recipe among hunters, Pete Champnoy sent us a recipe for venison jerky. Now, you can take strips of venison like this, trim them up. You could dip them in soy sauce, we've done it, or just Worcestershire sauce.
Or just dry it.
Right, and dry it in the oven, and it'll be tasty. But he sent us a recipe. Look at the ingredients.
A lot of ingredients.
We've discussed this, saying, how can it be right?
Right.
But Pete Champnoy says he's from Dorr, Michigan, and he says that...
Well, he spent 3 years getting these together.
Yeah, soy sauce, first of all. I'm going to put in a third cup of soy sauce. Then we add third cup of Worcestershire sauce.
Both of these are going to brown it or give it a color.
Now, this blows my mind here.
Right.
Hickory liquid smoke. Now, liquid smoke is powerful
It's strong.
stuff. He says a third cup of liquid smoke. Well,
Says
we're going to
recipes,
try it.
and it's good.
We tasted it as venison, and it was good. We're going to put in a third cup of barbecue sauce, like that. Now, that's just about all of the liquid ingredients we
Right.
have. Now, here's something that's...
You usually don't find this in too many of your venison recipes.
no, this is called kitchen bouquet.
You need a tablespoon of that.
Tablespoon. Actually, it's kind of dangerous to pour things like this
Yes,
over
it is. Over the top of it.
Well, we're going to try it. Now, good old Lowry seasoning salt, and he requires 2 teaspoons of that. I'm just going to put the rest of that
That
in
looks
there.
good.
2 teaspoons.
White
Now,
pepper.
White pepper.
You're going to add some black pepper, but this is going to be... Have you tasted white pepper? It's got a different...
Yeah, it does. It definitely tastes
Right.
different. A little bit of onion powder, a
1
teaspoon
right.
of that. Now, that sounds good. I would... salt.
Just some salt.
Yeah, some salt. He says a tablespoon of salt, but believe me, there's plenty of salt in this entire recipe. Tender quick salt.
This is going to cure it, actually.
This will have an effect of tenderizing and curing. And it calls for 2 tablespoons of this.
Right.
And what we're going to do, by the way, is we're making a marinade here that we're going to leave the venison in overnight for about 24 hours. There's our tender quick salt. Now a teaspoon of
Garlic powder.
Garlic powder. This will give it a little bit of a zing.
Yep, and it will.
I know there's people at home are probably saying the same thing that we said when we saw this recipe. A
Tenderizer.
teaspoon of Adolph's meat tenderizer, which sort of reinforces and flavors the same thing that the Tender Quick salt does.
Right.
And now I'm going to take a half teaspoon of
Red pepper.
red pepper, cayenne
That's-
pepper.
Yep, good.
Hot stuff, some spicy. A quarter teaspoon, he says, of pepper, my favorite
That's
ingredient in the whole
good.
world. And he says a quarter teaspoon, and look at this. This really knocks me out.
Bring out the flavor.
2 teaspoons of accent to bring out the flavor.
You've added all kinds of flavor.
Yeah, right. I'm going to get my teaspoon out here. But he says 2 teaspoons of this.
That's good.
That should do the job. Now, I guess I'll just stir it up
Right.
here with this mixing spoon. Measuring spoon, but we stir this up and add the venison.
Just
You can go ahead and put
add
some in there,
this.
Kath, as I stir it. We're going to add this and leave it marinate overnight, which is going to put all of that flavor, all that
Right straight through
tenderizing
it.
into the venison. And then we're going to hang this. Do you want to hand me that oven rack?
You want to hold it up for you?
Okay, we're going to hang it on an oven rack through a toothpick like that. Slide it into the oven for, 6 to 8 hours.
Very slow oven.
Well, at the lowest you can
That's
get your
right.
oven to go, that's going to be between 125 and 150 degrees. With all of these ingredients dried out overnight,
It's good.
we'll
we
taste
had
it.
some.
We're going to taste it in a minute, but now let's take a look at the question for this week's outdoor quiz. How old is the sport of competitive fly casting? On March 15th, 1897, the first indoor fly casting tournament was held in New York City. That was 88 years ago. Well, it doesn't actually look like much, but it's dried venison with Pete Champnoy's concoction there, and it comes right apart, and it's, when you dry it this way overnight, it really isn't hard.
It's not tough at all.
What do you think, Bob?
I'm surprised. Usually, this stuff is so tough. I mean, it's good, but you have to gnaw and gnaw. Not this stuff. It really is. It's really kind of fine grained.
I don't know where the liquid smoke went.
Boy, there's a lot of it. It's peppery. You don't taste liquid smoke.
Oh, I
You
love
just-
this. This is the best. Pete Champnoy's, this is the best jerky I've ever
A
tasted.
little
I think
barley
so, too.
pop maybe with it.
Boy, this is really good. All of those ingredients don't detract from it.
No,
And
not
don't-
at all.
It's excellent. What a concoction. Took him 3 years to come up with that.
Well, he did it right.
You sure did, Pete. Thanks a lot for that recipe. And you folks can have a copy of this recipe if you wish. All you have